Welcome, everybody, to Take on the World 2022 virtual conference. We are so excited to have you joining us. We hope that you are thoroughly loving all of the presentations given. We know there are phenomenal ones with excellent speakers, and we have an awesome one here today. So I know Chris and I haven't done biblical health in forever.
So this is our return to doing a show that we started way back when. And today we have a guest that when we did it over at Now You See TV with this guest in particular, this original video got over 100,000 views.
Yes.
And helped out so many different people. And without further ado, today's guest is Dr. Patrick Vickers.
Did that interview get 100,000 views?
It got over 100,000.
Sure did.
Yeah.
Yes. And
wow.
We absolutely loved having you at Take on the World 2021 last year. The audience was wowed by the presentation, as I know everyone watching will be today. The topic that Dr. Vickers is going to discuss today with all of us is reversing cancer and degenerative diseases through restoring metabolism. And metabolism, that's a hot word today, with all the different various topics and information out there. So many people are utterly confused.
Every weight loss program is based on restoring metabolism. Do these things do it? Like the things that we're seeing, the carnivore diets and eating all these organ meats, trying to restore metabolism. Are all these things, is this the best route to go? Ketogenic diet, right? There's a lot of different stuff that we'll talk about. So,
and I always message Dr. Vickers like, what's your take on this? And so we thought this would be a perfect video to really understand the chemistry of the body. And that's really what it boils down to. So I'm going to let you take the stage, and we'll ask questions intermittently, but please share your wealth of information with everybody.
Well, yeah. So for those who don't know, I'm a chiropractor, and I graduated from New York Chiropractic College in 1997. I wanted to be a chiropractor ever since I was 11 years old. And I'm a year away from graduating when a woman's invited to come speak at my school named Charlotte Gerson. Well, who's Charlotte Gerson? Well, she's the last living iconic daughter of Dr. Max Gerson, who Nobel Peace Prize winner, Dr. Albert Schweitzer, who, believe it or not, is considered the greatest Christian of his generation. He called Dr. Max Gerson the greatest genius in medical history. Well, Gerson died in 1959, and Charlotte died just 4 years ago at the age of 97, I believe. And I lived with Charlotte Gerson. I'm one of a handful of people who've actually ever studied Dr. Max Gerson's handwritten files, which she kept in her garage up until her death in 2020 or 2018, something like that.
Could I ask you a question about that real quick?
Sure.
So, living with Charlotte Gerson, because they're Jewish, correct? Yeah. So, and you were a Bible Christian when you first met with her. What kind of things did you kind of notice that they were doing that you saw that weren't even really biblical, that you were seeing like in the church, that you were now seeing, from this new perspective of people in Judaism?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, Charlotte wasn't a practicing Hebrew, right? And Dr. Gerson was actually a converted Hebrew to Christianity. His best friend was Albert Schweitzer. They were best friends, and he essentially converted Gerson to Christianity. So Gerson was a believer. Charlotte was, for all intents and purposes, pretty new agey, to be perfectly honest with you. So I didn't really see any differentiating aspects between Christianity and Judaism in the way she particularly lived her life. But I can tell you that she lived her life strictly in accordance with the principles of her father's therapy, the Gerson therapy. I mean, she lived it out like nobody ever lived it out before, because she wanted to be a living demonstration of what her father created. And, Charlotte herself, up until she died, was the longest living Gerson survivor. Her father cured her of advanced tuberculosis when she was just 12 years old. So when she died, up to that point, she was the longest living Gerson survivor. And so, you know, she had a real fond love and respect for her father. And she was really serious about how she took care of her body to be a living demonstration of what, you know, what the human body was designed to look like and live like at a very late age. And had she not fallen and broken her hip, which essentially demobilized her, and she didn't fall and break her hip like most old people fall and break their hip. They actually break their hip and fall because of osteoporosis. Charlotte Gerson literally fell, you know, a hard fall, and broke her hip up at the acetabulum, right where it attaches to the hip bone. And, you know, from that point on, she, you know, became pretty immobile. And that's ultimately what, you know, facilitated and speeded up her death. But anyway, point being, look, Gerson's been dead since 1959. He died in 1959. Like I mentioned, Schweitzer called him the most eminent genius in medical history. 8 movies have chronicled Dr. Gerson's work. There's no other therapy that can remotely boast but 1, maybe 2 movies that have chronicled, you know, their work. But you know, so I'm so intimately attached to it at this point. You know, when Charlotte died, and then shortly thereafter, her son Howard died suddenly. And that left nobody to take on, you know, the baton or the reins of the Gerson therapy. And so by default, I've essentially, you know, become the face of the therapy right now anywhere in the world. So we have a clinic in Mexico where we're doing the therapy. And, you know, the question is, I always get the question, why is the Gerson therapy historically, you know, so successful and the most successful of all the therapies that are out there? And the answer is simple. Because it's the most difficult. There are no shortcuts to healing. The Gerson therapy is a highly specific, highly intensive, very disciplined therapy that requires the patient to radically change their lifestyle, and they have to detox their body and their specific supplementation. But the Gerson therapy is so successful because it's the most difficult. There are no shortcuts to healing. There's no IV you can be hooked up to. There's no magic supplement, no magic herb that you can take that's going to reverse your advanced terminal cancer. It requires a comprehensive, multifaceted approach through diet, detoxification, very specific dietary rules that would shock most people, and we'll probably get into that, and very specific supplementation that's based on one thing and one thing only, and that is metabolism. If you read Dr. Gerson's book that he wrote before he died, you will see one word he mentions over and over and over again, and that word is metabolism. And so to understand the cause and the cure of disease and maintaining human health, you have to be able to properly understand what is metabolism and how does it function in a human body on a daily basis. So let's break that down. What is metabolism? What is metabolism by definition? It's the breakdown of food into energy. When you see someone who's sick and or dying, what's one of the first things you notice? They're lethargic. Well, why are they lethargic? Because they've lost the capacity to produce energy on a cellular level. And metabolism is just that, the breakdown of food into energy. You must correct all the aspects of metabolism in order to restore the body's ability to create energy. It's energy that the immune system requires to rally an immune response against a disease and to maintain a healthy immune system. So you have to restore metabolism, and there's various aspects to that. It's actually a 3-pronged approach to restoration of metabolism. So let's start with the obvious. Where is metabolism beginning? Where does the breakdown of food into energy begin? Well, it begins in the gut, right? It begins in the digestive tract. Is it any wonder that we're taught in natural medicine that 70% of your immune system dwells where? In your intestinal tract, in your digestive tract. And that is where metabolism, the breakdown of food into energy, begins. So if you're going to heal any disease, you have to heal the gut. Now, how do you heal the gut? Again, There's no IV. There's no supplement that's going to, in and of itself, heal the gut. There are some supplements you can take to facilitate the healing of the gut, but the one thing that heals the gut, and really the one thing only, is food. So the Gerson therapy, you're getting 20 pounds of organic fruits and vegetables every single day. 20 pounds. And that's mostly in the form of juices. You're getting probably 16 to 17 pounds of juices, one juice every hour on the hour daily for 13 hours. And then you're also getting 3 organic meals every single day. And believe it or not, those meals are thoroughly cooked. Gerson was absolutely adamant that the meals be thoroughly cooked. Why? Because someone who's sick and or dying, their digestive tract is sick. If you put them on an all raw diet, they won't do well. Their body, their digestive tract's not capable of taking raw produce and extracting all the nutrients and breaking down the fiber like a healthy body normally should be able to do. So Gerson was adamant that you got your raw food out of the 13 fresh pressed juices every day, compiling 16 to 17 pounds of produce, and that the rest of your meals were absolutely thoroughly cooked, because cooking is actually a form of pre-digestion in that it's much easier to break down. So that's how you begin to heal the gut. Now, what else do we do to enhance that foundation of the Gerson therapy? We give gut restore. I mean, we give Shan supplement a gut restore because we know we have to restore the normal bacterial flora in the gut. We've destroyed the normal bacterial flora in the gut from the highly processed foods, the chemicals in our foods, antibiotic overabuse, pharmaceutical drugs, stress, all of these things. We've destroyed the gut and the gut's natural bacterial flora. So we have to restore that. And we do that by giving daily probiotics on top of the juices. We also give a very special aloe supplement, from Stockton Aloe in Florida. It's raw, unadulterated aloe. You never buy aloe off the store shelves, ever. It's been deodorized, decolorized, and it's been loaded with preservatives. Normal aloe breaks down like a fruit or a vegetable. In 4 to 5 days, you need to throw it out because it starts to ferment. Well, we get this aloe frozen straight from the Dominican Republic, organic. It arrives to us frozen. We transfer it into bottles to keep it frozen, and we use it as we need it. We go through a bottle a day. And there's not a more potent healer of the digestive tract, the epithelial lining of the gut, than the aloe. So that goes in every juice. We're also using raw spirulina, not powdered dry spirulina or encapsulated spirulina, raw living spirulina, grown and harvested organically in Vero Beach, Florida, sent to us overnight. It can only last 2 weeks before it also breaks down, and that's going into the juice as well. So this is where you start to restore metabolism. That's the beginning. Now, once you've restored metabolism at the level of the gut, now the gut's able to digest food. You're now able to absorb the nutrients into the arteries, into the bloodstream. You now must get everything into the cells where the mitochondria convert that food into energy. And now let's talk about that.
Can I interrupt? Just
you may
pause for one moment, because I just wanted to highlight something. When you mentioned the cooked meals, I think a lot of people get hung up on, well, what is the cooked meals and how do you cook those meals? I think that's probably super important for people to understand. The Gerson diet is one that eliminates salt.
That's right.
Doesn't cook in fat.
That's
correct?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So those are key things today, at least from a lot of influencers that I read about. So many people are telling individuals to add salt to their water. And also mainly for the adrenal glands and for the minerals in the salt that the body needs. And then also cooking in a lot of oils. You know, a lot of these diets are higher in fat because the brain needs fat, the body needs fat. So I would love for you to just expound on those two elements, because I think that's what really sets the Gerson therapy apart, and also how it relates to metabolism.
And one real quick thing. So I know that the topic is reversing cancer and degenerative diseases. Also apply this to the average person who maybe isn't on those routes, but ultimately gets themselves in those routes. How can we
prevent?
How can we stop these things from happening without living a lifestyle of super restriction, super this, super that? But how can we get to these points, and what are the key things that we need to start cutting out of everyday diets?
Yeah. Well, Gerson, for the healthy people, would say that, 80%, 20%, is pretty much the percentages on which you should try to obey Gerson principles. But 20%, enjoy yourself. Have the things that, might not be considered healthy in nutritional circles. But we can get into that later. But, to address Liz's points about salt and oils, that's actually part of what would be coming next in relationship to, once you've healed the gut, now you've got to heal the metabolism of the cell. But you're right. The Gerson therapy is a low fat, no salt diet. There's absolutely no cooking with oils. You cook with an oil, you destroy that oil, it enters the body, it wreaks havoc on the system. People say, well, there's oils that are better at higher temperature thresholds. That may or may not be true, but the reality is when it hits high heat, you transform the chemistry and it becomes unhealthy. And a lot of these oils that people are cooking with, even before you cook with them, are unhealthy. And I'm going to get into that. But anyway, so let's talk about the inside of the cell, because that's where energy is created. So inside your cell, you have little things called mitochondria. Oh, and here comes the juice. Thank you very much. There comes the juice. Inside your cells, you have these little things called mitochondria. Now, the ketogenic diet people will tell you that the mitochondria like and prefer fat in order to create it into energy. And that's why they tell you sugar feeds cancer. Well, I'll tell you, if sugar fed cancer, the Gerson therapy would be leading people straight to their death quicker than they would get there naturally, because our patients are getting 3,500 to 4,000 calories a day in sugars from fruits and vegetables. So how is it possible? How is it possible that sugar can feed cancer if the Gerson therapy has the most renowned reputation in history for being able to reverse advanced disease? Hence why 8 movies have chronicled Dr. Gerson's work. Why? Because it's not sugar that feeds cancer. It's sugar that heals cancer. And I'm going to explain why the ketogenic people have it wrong in regards to that statement that don't eat a lot of fruits and vegetables because that'll feed the cancer. That's the most ludicrous nutritional theory out there to this day. In 10 years, that will go down with the Atkins diet as the most ridiculous way that you could try to approach any aspect of health. Atkins for weight loss, ketogenic diet for cancer. And we'll explain that. But the mitochondria, ever since the earth was built on the single cell organism, prefers carbohydrates. So the mitochondria take sugar, and in the presence of oxygen, they convert it into energy. Now, if no oxygen is readily available to get into the cell, that cycle will not go towards the production of energy. It will go into a state of fermentation and ultimately produce lactic acid. And that is what perpetuates disease over and over and over again on a daily basis. And it's going to be coming down to the issue of alkalinity and acidity, which we're going to discuss in a second. But just to give the understanding of what's going on is, once you absorb your nutrients into the bloodstream, you have to convert those sugars into energy. That requires oxygen. That requires all the nutrients in the food that you're actually eating. Now, when you think about that, how many times are we eating on a daily basis things made with white rice, white sugar, white flour? These things have been stripped of their nutrients. You still have to convert it into energy, but the nutrients are gone. So where's your body going to get it? Your bone and your bone marrow. Your bone and your bone marrow They are nutrient reserve tanks for your immune system. And when they are abused day after day after day with the consumption of these processed foods made with stripped flour, stripped sugar, your body must take the bone and the bone marrow and deplete it in order to run these foods through the energy cycles on a daily basis. And this is really another crux of the matter. People coming into my clinic, the average age is probably around 50, 55. That's about the amount of time that the body can handle this onslaught of abusive diet over time, and it just depletes and depletes and depletes the immune system until there's nothing left. I have cancer. Liz, you have cancer. Chris, you have cancer. We all have cancer. It's a normal bodily process for the immune system to break down cancer on a daily basis, get rid of it, and restore the body to health. That's a daily process. So at what point does the body stop doing what it's designed normally to do? The depletion of the body over decade after decade after decade. And so again, it all comes down to restoring the organism from the depletion, from the toxicity, so that the mitochondria inside the cell can begin to convert sugar into energy. But from the beginning of time, the mitochondria bodies have been built, humanity has been built on the consumption of carbohydrates. And that is why sugar heals cancer and maintains health as well. So inside the cells, you have these little things called mitochondria that convert sugar into energy. They need the presence of oxygen. And this is the other issue, where we have destroyed our body's metabolism through destroying the cell's ability to intake oxygen into the cell. And it's dietary again. Let me finish my juice. And if you have any questions, maybe you might want to ask me while I'm juicing.
So what all is in that juice?
Okay, so
spirulina.
There is no spirulina in this one, actually. No. I'm at home, so I don't have spirulina with me. But in the Gerson green juice, you have about a half of a green pepper, 2 outer leaves of a red cabbage. You have 1 leaf of chard, 1 Granny Smith apple, some watercress, and then varying lettuces to make up the remainder of an 8-ounce juice. So that's what we're looking at here, essentially. And so patients get 4 of these a day. They get 9 carrot juices a day, or carrot apple, carrot lemon. And it's Granny Smith apple specifically. And I'll explain that in a second when we're talking about the mitochondrial conversion of sugar into energy. So let me just pound this down real quick. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I have tried to make that juice. It's can be difficult to find all the different lettuces, but it's pretty much like drinking a salad.
Well, yeah,
that's what I would.
Well,
think
let me ask you this.
Or pond water, one of the two.
So let me ask you this: since your clinic is called the Advanced Gerson Therapy Clinic, if you could really just let the listener know who may have been familiar with some of the past work of Max Gerson, some of the other clinics, Charlotte's kind of refusal to look at some of the advanced treatments that Dr. Max Gerson wanted to do to improve upon there. In that juice, is that one of the original juices, or is that something that you have studied, looked into, or something that Max Gerson looked into that you're now using on your patients?
That's a great question, Chris. So that's one of the biggest, tragedies of that Charlotte left behind, was she never changed her father's therapy from the day he died. And if you knew Dr. Gerson, he was the consummate scientist. He was constantly trying to perfect his therapy based on what was coming out in the scientific literature. And so he died in 1959 after practicing the therapy for over 50 years. In 1952, he completely revamped his juicing protocol, completely based on what was coming out in the scientific literature. In his book, he mentioned therapies he wanted to try. He never got the chance to try them because he died. Well, we're doing them, or some of them anyway. So that's why we call it the Advanced Gerson Therapy. That juice you just saw there, that is from the basic Gerson protocol that Dr. Gerson left until 1959 when he died. Now, we have added lemon to some of the carrot juices. And that was based on a study Chris Wark from Chris Beat Cancer sent me, where they tested all these fruits and vegetables against cancer. And 2 fruits stood out clearly among all the rest. Like it was like night and day in their ability to fight cancer. And they were lemons and cranberries. So we've added lemon back into the Gerson juicing protocol, which Gerson had prior to when he revamped it in 1952. So we've taken Dr. Gerson's basic tenays, which he left behind, and we've just expounded on them by adding other therapies like oxygen therapy, hyperbaric oxygen, IV ozone, pulse electromagnetic frequency therapy, which they say oxygenates tissues 30% greater than a chamber, rectal ozone, hydrogen peroxide. So we do all those to enhance Dr. Gerson's basic protocol, which I'm going to go into, why that's important, the oxygen as it relates, to enhancing Dr. Gerson's work. So this is what essentially compounds the Advanced Gerson protocol. There's some extra supplements we've thrown in there. I won't go into those now, so we can concentrate on the issue at hand here, which is metabolism. But we've thrown a few things in on the supplement end. I mentioned the aloe and the spirulina already. That wasn't part of Gerson's original protocol. But so these are the things that, that compound our Advanced Gerson therapy. Dr. Gerson's work, as he left it in 1959, with some of these extra things added to enhance and build on what he left us. So getting back to metabolism, we talked about healing the gut. So we've healed the gut. Now we have to restore cellular metabolism. And this is where we've really done some serious damage. But before I get started on that, how many times have we heard an alkaline diet promotes health, an acidic diet promotes disease? Those two terms have been thrown around constantly without ever really being explained. An alkaline diet promotes health. I heard an acidic diet, whatever that means, promotes disease. Well, what does that mean? What are people talking about when they mention those two terms? And what are the implications on human health and disease? Well, when we're talking about alkalinity and acidity, what are we talking about? We're talking about pH. Well, what's pH? pH is potential hydrogen. That's what pH is. It's potential hydrogen. pH, potential hydrogen. So when we're acidic, by definition, we have a buildup of hydrogen in the body. Why is this significant? When you have a buildup of hydrogen in the body, as oxygen approaches the cell, the charge at the level of the cell, and I'm going to go into this deeper, cannot accept oxygen. It also can't accept all the nutrients and everything you need that needs to go into the cell, because that's all based on the charge at the level of the cell membrane. So when we have a buildup of hydrogen in the body and at the level of the cell membrane, as oxygen approaches that cell to go in and react with the mitochondria so that the mitochondria can convert sugar into energy, it literally gets repelled away because the cell cannot accept it. And this is the very premise of the Nobel work that Otto Warburg won in 1931. He won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for demonstrating that cancer, viruses, bacteria can't survive in a body where the cells are properly oxygenated. And he went on to talk about how the body's primary ability to oxygenate cells is an alkaline diet. That was the premise of his work. Now, you need to know that Gerson, 20 years before that, already had a therapy demonstrating just that. Ironically, Warburg won his Nobel Prize from the University of Freiburg, where Gerson graduated from. So I'd have to think that somewhere along the way, Warburg won his Nobel Prize on the back of Dr. Gerson's work, because they all knew each other, and they come from the same university only 20 years later. Anyway, point being, when you are acidic, you have a buildup of hydrogen, and that's unbonded, positively charged hydrogen molecules that are affecting the charge at the level of the cell and the cell membrane. So the proper definition of acidity, you could say, is the improper utilization of oxygen. And that is where the crux of the matter lies. When you have an acidic diet, you cannot properly convert sugar into energy because you can't get oxygen into the cell because the charge at the level of the cell will not accept it. And this is where the ketogenic people have it right. If you have an acidic diet, you can't convert sugar into energy. It will go down pathways that convert sugar into lactic acid, and that would feed cancer. So on the acidic, ketogenic, high fat, high oil, high meat, high protein diet, sugar would feed cancer. On an alkaline diet, sugar heals cancer. How? By neutralizing hydrogen. How does it neutralize hydrogen? When you drink a juice, that juice gets broken down into potassium hydroxide. And this would include eating raw fruits and vegetables. It gets broken down in potassium hydroxide. Now, when you write a hydroxyl molecule chemically, it's OH negative. OH negative. You're familiar with OH negative, Kangen water, right? OH negative. OH negative is a highly, highly alkaline molecule. What are we trying to neutralize? That positively charged hydrogen molecule, H+. So you have all this H+ in the body that needs to be neutralized. OH negative molecules coming into the body react with the H positive molecules. And what do you get? OH negative, H positive, 2 H's and an O, water. Water now is a neutral charge. The body now can start to accept oxygen into the cell because you've now neutralized the charge or alkalinized the charge, even better. And oxygen now can pour into the cells, and you can now begin converting your food into energy, i.e. restoration of metabolism. Now let's talk about, where is this hydrogen coming from?
Can I ask you real fast though?
Sure.
In reference to the acidity being the improper utilization of oxygen and how sugar cannot get converted, this to me also says this is what's occurring in somebody who has diabetes, correct?
Nobel Peace Prize winner Albert Schweitzer had severely advanced diabetes 8 years before he won the Nobel Peace Prize. Gerson cured him in 6 weeks. Wow. When people come into our clinic, okay, with diabetes secondary to their cancer, or they come to us with diabetes, and we're talking type 2 diabetes, or we're talking type 1 diabetes, where the body still has the ability to produce insulin, because there's 2 types of type 1. One that produces insulin, one that can't. The one that can, and type 2 diabetes, within 3 to 4 weeks, we've completely normalized their sugar levels on 3,500 to 4,000 calories of sugar a day. How do you do that?
Yes.
Because diabetes has nothing to do with glucose intake.
Right.
It has nothing to do with it.
Is it more about the fat? The fat.
It's the fat. In metabolic syndrome, which is also implicated in type 2 diabetes, right? And in type 2 diabetes, you have cholesterol occupying insulin receptor sites. And so they're producing insulin, but it can't get to the receptors because you have fat and cholesterol occupying those sites. This therapy drips cholesterol off the insulin receptor sites. 1, the diet, but 2, flax oil. Do you know flax oil, when it meets up with cholesterol, dissolves it into a solution? Because cholesterol in your body, it's hard. At body temperature, it's hard. That's why it clogs arteries, right? Well, when you take flax oil, you literally dissolve cholesterol into solution. So it just falls right off and can get processed much easier by the liver at that point, right? So diabetes, weight loss. Weight loss has nothing to do with caloric intake. They're telling you 1,200 to 1,500 calories a day if you want to lose weight. Well, why are our patients losing a quarter to a pound a day until they're their normal weight on 3,500 calories a day? How's that possible? Because like diabetes, weight loss has nothing to do with caloric or sugar intake. It has everything to do with being able to convert those sugars into energy. Now, of course, we're not talking Snickers bars, ice cream and stuff, obviously, because what else is in that? Well, the thing that I haven't gotten to yet, and we're talking fats. Now, getting back to the cell and its conversion of sugar into energy, we said it requires oxygen. Oxygen must penetrate the cell membrane in order to convert sugar into energy. Well, around your cell, you have a cell membrane. That cell membrane is the gatekeeper. It determines what can go in, what can't go in, what must come out, what can't go out. That's all determined at the level of the cell membrane by the charge at the level of the cell membrane. So it's actually an issue of biophysics. It's not an issue of biochemistry. And so we've so messed up the charge at the level of the cell membrane from one thing and essentially one thing only, and that's the consumption of the types of fats we're consuming. Now, when we were talking about alkalinity in the city, what were we talking about? pH. What's pH? Potential hydrogen. Okay? So, let's talk about fats. What are fats? Fats are long carbon chains. They're medium carbon chains, or they're small carbon chains. The fats we're typically talking about are the long carbon chains. There's a medium carbon chain that I'm going to mention because everybody thinks it's a health food, and it's not. But we're going to talk about, the ones most people are eating today. So fats are long carbon chains, and their definitions are based on their saturation with one thing, hydrogen. So you've heard of a saturated fat. Well, what's a saturated fat? Saturated with hydrogen. All those carbon bonds are saturated with hydrogen at each bond. That's what defines a saturated fat, saturated with hydrogen. You see where I'm going with this? pH, acidity, potential hydrogen. So cookies, cake, ice cream, meat, coconut oil, the medium chain fatty acid that's hard at room temperature. Why is it hard at room temperature? Because it's completely saturated with hydrogen. So you have all these fats that we're eating with today. And if you read the labels on store-bought foods, partially hydrogenated oil, companies have learned they can bubble hydrogen into the products and they can stabilize them and store them on the shelf till Christ returns. And so these are the things that we're consuming today. And the body's going to use whatever fats you're feeding it to maintain the cell membrane. What kind of fats are we supposed to be eating today? Well, olive oil for a healthy person can support health. Why? Because it's a monosaturated fat, meaning some of its bonds are saturated, some of them aren't. So if you're healthy, a little bit of raw olive oil on a daily basis could be beneficial and help you to maintain health. But really what we need, and people are going to say, well, I heard these cause free radical formation, and therefore when you consume them, it destroys the body because it causes a bunch of free radicals. Well, not on a high diet of fruits and vegetables that contain antioxidants in order to protect that fat from free radical formation, right? So on the Gerson therapy, Gerson tried all the oils. And the only oil that he found did not cause tumors to grow is flax oil. So our patients are getting 2 tablespoons of flax oil for the first 6 weeks, and then they're getting 1 tablespoon for the remainder of their 2 years on the therapy on a daily basis. What does that do? So all those saturated fats that have gone to make up the cell membrane from people's consumption of all the things high in saturated fat, now the cell membrane is getting the fats that it needs, and it's restoring the charge at the level of the cell membrane with the proper polyunsaturated unsaturated fat of flax oil. Okay? And this is how you restore metabolism at the level of the cell membrane. Now that you've restored it with something that's not loaded with hydrogen, i.e. the saturated fat, oxygen is approaching the cell and it's literally getting sucked into the cell. Do you know flax oil literally has the ability to suck oxygen into the cell like a magnet because its charge draws it in? And so that's the second aspect of metabolism you must restore, the cell membrane. And the only way you can restore that cell membrane is the proper fats, because the cell membrane's made up of fats. It's a phospholipid. And it's going to be made up of whatever fats you're feeding it.
So Chris ran to the fridge and got this. Do you approve of Trader Joe's organic flax oil?
That's a good question. You know, Trader Joe's, I'm going to assume they're bottling it under their name and they're getting it from a provider like Barleans or Omega. We use Omega, right? Spectrum would probably be a good brand as well. So I'm assuming they're branding it under their name, but they're getting it from, they don't have their own cold press machine. I can guarantee you that, right? Yeah. So I would probably trust that, especially if it's refrigerated. Is it refrigerated?
Yes, we keep it refrigerated.
Do they keep it refrigerated?
They don't.
Oh,
they don't.
Then you got to start wondering, right?
Okay. And you're not cooking this for your patients. How exactly are they taking it?
Yeah. So like when I'm there, I put it in my oatmeal. We're making our dressings with it at the clinic, right? So the dressings for the salads. So that's it. It's raw. You just do not cook with oils. It's that simple, you know, because you do ultimately turn it into a trans fat and it becomes unhealthy. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
You mentioned I assume you were talking about the polyunsaturated oils, the PUFAs, as everybody talks about being basically the seed oils for anybody unfamiliar with that terminology. So that would be your canola oils, your grapeseed, what other oils are there?
Sunflower, safflower. Okay.
Yeah.
So there you have to differentiate with the polyunsaturated, the ones that are high in omega-3 and the ones that are high in omega-6. We know the ones high in omega-6, sunflower, safflower, canola, those are really, they're in too high of amount, they can become very highly inflammatory. And so you do have to limit, obviously, the amount of those omega-6s that you're getting in your diet. Whereas flax oil is like the perfect combination of omega-3, omega-6, I think even omega-9 and omega-12, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that, right? You know, I'm not an expert in oils. That would be Udo Erasmus's, you know, line of work. But anyway, so flax oil, you know, comprehensively is probably the best oil you could be consuming on a daily basis. But even still, Gerson found that if he gave more than 2 tablespoons, then more than 1 tablespoon after so many weeks, he could start to feed the cancer. Why? Because he also found out that tumors love fats. Mm-hmm. Cancers love fat. They're hormonal monsters, and they love consuming fats. So that's why Gerson therapy is a low-fat, no salt diet. And so you still even have to be careful with flax oil. I wouldn't be doing more than 1 or 2 tablespoons of flax oil. I mean, if you think about it, how many flax seeds went into that 1 tablespoon of flax oil, right?
A ton, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, look, the cavemen didn't have a cold press machine where they were making flax oil, right?
Well, what do you think of the use of chia seeds in their raw form, like in oatmeal, things of that nature?
Adding it to your oatmeal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I really don't know much about chia seeds, to be perfectly honest with you. But, you know, in terms of Gerson therapy, that's the oil that Gerson, that was his go-to oil, which was actually part of the Budwig protocol. I'm not sure if he integrated because of Johanna Budwig or if he found the same findings as Johanna Budwig did when he was doing his work. But again,
I found that interesting because that's mixed with cottage cheese, correct? So you're getting the fat, right? Or is it cottage cheese more of a fat-free product?
Fat-free.
Okay. But
So
what
the
about the
patients,
dairy? What about the dairy aspect
The
to it?
acidity of the dairy.
huh?
The acidity of the dairy.
Well, so that's a good question, right? So Gerson, at 6 weeks on the Gerson therapy, Gerson was adamant that you add in 4 to 6 tablespoons of non-fat organic yogurt or cottage cheese, non-fat, that you make, not store-bought, right? Because what happens when you get the milk, the cream goes to the top, the milk goes to the bottom, and you sweep the cream off. Same thing with the cottage cheese, okay? Now, people would say, well, that causes acidity, right? Well, first of all, the fat's been swept off.
Mm-hmm.
So naturally homogenized milk would naturally be acidic, right? But with the fat swept off, it's much less acidic, if not acidic at all. But it's an interesting question. I have to wonder, because of the high alkalinity of the diet, if Gerson didn't add it for that reason, to start balancing the pH a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, it wasn't until 1980 or something that a study came out by a guy named Robert Good. He was a professor at the University of Minnesota. And he did a study, and he put people, I'm not sure if it was cancer patients and other disease patients, but he put them all on a vegetarian diet. And in the first 6 weeks, which is when Gerson added, right? He added yogurt and cottage cheese into the diet at 6 weeks. Well, in 1980, 21 years after Gerson's death, this study comes out by Robert Good, where he puts all these people on a vegetarian diet, and for 6 weeks, their immune system goes through the roof. And then at 6 weeks, it begins to drop a little bit and plateau. And it wasn't until he added yogurt into his study that it kept the immune system functioning at a higher level than it did before the drop and plateau.
Well, let me ask you a question here on that same note. What do you think of today? Because you have every nut source is a new yogurt,
Right.
and how do you create your own yogurts, like maybe using a supplement or something of that nature? How would you how would somebody be able to do that? And what do you think of all those nut yogurts compared to
Or like a coconut milk yogurt?
those types of things? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really don't know. You take coconut milk. I mean, I don't see a problem with creating a yogurt out of that. I don't see the harm in doing that. But some of these other things, I don't know, like cashews, right? Cashews are toxic. Did you know that? They're actually quite toxic to the human body. I know. I love cashews. And they say one handful of cashews is the equivalent of 1 dose of an antidepressant.
Okay.
You could substitute those, but don't take that as medical advice, please. I don't need that coming back at me. But anyway, I don't know. What's one of the things you have to do with nuts and seeds to make them bioavailable to the body? You have to germinate them, right?
Mm.
And you have to germinate them, which is soak them. And then after soaking them, you have to put them in a glass bowl and with a wet cloth over them for another 12 to 24 hours until they germinate, not sprout, but germinate. And then they become bioavailable. So by turning them into yogurt, are they becoming more bioavailable? I would have to assume so, right? We know that when we ferment soy, we take the toxic things of soy and we can actually convert it into a, consumable form, so to speak, i.e. miso. The only problem with miso is it's like the highest form of sodium you can get out of anything other than soy sauce, right? These other nuts and seeds, I didn't know they were making them into yogurt, but it would make sense that if you're going to make them consumable to the human body, you should probably germinate and or ferment them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I have to say on the issue, though I have no idea. But
in the regards of creating your own, because I believe you guys have tried or used probiotics in cultivating, capsulating. Is that essential? Is that what you need as a starter to start a fermenting for yogurt?
No, not necessarily, right? Like the cottage cheese, yes, you have to make your own cottage cheese. You can't walk into a store and buy cottage cheese. Too high in sodium. And I think it's almost, I've never seen a no fat cottage cheese, to be perfectly honest with you. But, um, but the yogurt, that's different. We've had patients survive no problem going to the store, buying non fat organic yogurt. But if you make your own, you need a starter, right? I mean, you need a yogurt starter that you either would get from someone or you can buy it. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. I used to make my own yogurt, and you put a starter in, you boil it, put the starter in, put it in the sun for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 hours. Next thing you know, you got yogurt. Now, you mentioned, can you take a probiotic and convert it into yogurt? Well, we tried Shan's supplement with Organic Valley whole milk yogurt at room temperature, and within 10 to 15 minutes, it started to curd, right? And who knows what it would do if you put so much in regular milk and let it sit for a while in the sun and in the heat and let it ferment. So that's a possibility. I might try that and then create my own starter, right? But anyway, getting back to the premise of yogurt. Yogurt played an absolutely vital role in Gerson's therapy. What he used it for, I honestly do not know. When I was studying his work, I never really understood why he integrated it. But I can tell you that Robert Good, 20 years later, he found a reason why. And the reason why was it kept people's immune systems functioning at a higher level. So getting back to metabolism, we restored the gut. How did we restore the gut? We restored it through food, through supplements, through the probiotics. We give enzymes, we give the aloe, we give spirulina. We restore the gut. Now the gut's able to absorb the nutrients into the bloodstream. We now have to get those nutrients and the sugars from the bloodstream into the cell so that we can convert it into energy. That requires oxygen by the mitochondria. We can't get oxygen into the cell if we have a cell membrane that's made up of high saturated fats from cookies, cake, ice cream, meat, dairy, cheese, you name it. All the garbage that we're eating today, partially hydrogenated oils and foods, we can't get oxygen into the cell. So how do we change that? We change that by getting rid of all the things with saturated fat in it. There's no saturated fat on the Gerson therapy. Now people say, but the body needs saturated fat. Well, yes, it does. But guess what? Have you ever heard the term essential fatty acid? Saturated fat is never labeled as an essential fatty acid. Why is something labeled an essential fatty acid? The essential means that you must get it from your diet. The body can't produce it. That's why it's called an essential fatty acid. So you have to get essential fatty acids from your diet. Saturated fats are not an essential fatty acid ever. Why? Because the human body can create its own saturated fat. You actually do not need it in diet. So all those people telling you, you need saturated fats and a lot of it to stay healthy, they don't know what they're talking about because the human body can produce its own saturated fat. So by restoring the fats, i.e. the polyunsaturated fats that literally suck oxygen into the cell, you restore that aspect of metabolism. There's one more aspect of metabolism that we've completely destroyed from the day we were born that we must now also reverse. Liz mentioned it in the beginning of this interview. No salt. Salt has destroyed human health. We are potassium animals by nature. If you analyze true organic soil, and the Bible says the makeup of our body comes from the same constituents of the soil, we are potassium animals. The potassium to sodium ratios in the soil directly reflect how our diets should be reflected. Unfortunately, we have that reversed today. We're getting no potassium, which you get from fruits and vegetables, and we're getting tons of loaded sodium. Sodium in our canned, our bottled, our boxed, what we add to our food, it's loaded with sodium. And people will boast, well, I don't eat the bad salt. I eat the good salt. Well, there's a problem there because there's really no such thing as good salt. There's such thing as better salt, but there's no such thing as good salt. And let's expound on that a little bit. Table salt is 99.9% sodium chloride. It is the sodium chloride molecule that's destructive to the human body for 2 reasons, and I'll go into that. Nevertheless, that's table salt. Celtic salt, Himalayan salt, Dead Sea salt, they're all 85, 86, 87% sodium chloride. There's a reason why the Dead Sea is dead. There's a reason why Salt Lake City, the Salt Lake, is dead. And the reason why is because the sodium content can't support life. But let's break it down to what it means to you and me. What do you need inside the cell to be able to convert sugar into energy? Mitochondria. What organ in your body is specifically responsible for reproducing mitochondria? The thyroid gland. What's the thyroid gland dependent on? It's dependent on iodine. Well, that chloride molecule in sodium chloride, salt, it doesn't matter if it's table salt, Celtic salt, Dead Sea salt, whatever salt, that sodium chloride molecule displaces iodine from the thyroid gland. And so over time, as you continue to eat salt and salt and salt and salt, you're depleting and depleting and depleting iodine. Now, people say, well, there's perfect amounts of iodine in Celtic salt and Himalayan. No, there's not. The amount of sodium chloride compared to iodine does not meet those requirements. And so over time, you get a destruction of the thyroid gland and its ability to reproduce mitochondria, which you need to convert sugar into energy. So when someone's overweight, low energy, their hair's falling off on the sides, they get cold all the time, they're obese, we say they have a thyroid problem, right? Well, sodium chloride is one of the primary causes of that. Sodium chloride literally displaces iodine from the thyroid gland. And so we have to restore the thyroid gland's iodine capacity. That's why our patients are getting 18 drops of Lugol solution, which is iodine, every single day for 4 to 6 weeks to restore that depletion. Sodium chloride destroys the thyroid gland. So does fluoride, and so does bromine. Where do you get bromine from? Bread. All your breads today are made from bromine. Every time you're eating this bread that's made with bromine, and that's most of your breads, you're depleting the thyroid gland of iodine. So salt is one of the primary causes of destroying metabolism because of its destruction of the thyroid gland, which is specifically responsible for reproducing mitochondria. Now, there's one more thing that sodium chloride does in the human body. There's a law in the human body. You eat potassium, the body dumps sodium. You eat sodium, the body dumps potassium, and it swells up. The cell swells up with salt and water. Every single person today coming into my clinic, patient and companion, walks in with cells like this. Their cells are swelled up so big with salt and water, they all walk out 2 to 3 weeks later, 10 to 15 pounds lighter, just in salt and water weight that they've been storing up in their cells. Why? Because when you eat salt, salt and water enter the cells and they swell the cell up and it gets trapped in there. And you can't get it out unless you consume massive amounts of potassium. And on the Gerson therapies, 20 pounds of fruits and vegetables, you're getting massive amounts of potassium. And you're getting a special potassium compound powder in loads that Gerson created after 300 different experiments. So what you get is a massive flushing out of all that trapped salt and water in your cells so that your cells now can go back to their normal integrity and the mitochondria have a proper environment in which they can begin converting sugar into energy. So this is how you properly restore metabolism. The breakdown of food into energy. The breakdown occurs in the gut. You have to heal the gut. If you're sick, your gut's sick. Doesn't matter what disease you have. Once you heal the gut, you heal the cell membrane through the fats you consume or the lack of fats you consume on the Gerson therapy. And then you have to heal the internal portion of the cell, which has swelled up with salt and water in every single human being on the planet today because of our lifestyle. And the only way you can get that out is through massive amounts of potassium on a daily basis to restore proper cellular metabolism. And this is why the Gerson therapy reigns supreme for the last 120 years. This is why Albert Schweitzer called Gerson the greatest genius in medical history. He's been dead 63 years now. He remains the most eminent genius in medical history. And this is why 8 movies have chronicled Dr. Gerson's work. It's metabolism, metabolism, metabolism. And the ketogenic diet people, they defile that. They defile that by years of diet that abuses the very aspects of what we just talked about. People will say, well, when I started the ketogenic diet, I felt great. Well, you felt great because you stopped eating all the crap that was causing you to feel like crap in the first place, right? And you felt great for a while because of that, and because it does start to throw off ketones, which in the beginning starts to, help with energy production. But what happens? What's going to happen? The same thing that happened with the Atkins diet. With the Atkins diet in the beginning, people started to lose weight for that very same reason. But what happened? Over time, after the first year or two, their metabolism started to shut down because all the things I talked about today started to happen. Their metabolism, the aspects of it started to shut down, particularly at the level of the cell membrane. People couldn't get oxygen into the cells. But there's more to that. And let me explain this real quickly. This is really fascinating too. Why you can't heal on a high protein diet. I already explained most of it, but our bodies, they are pre-programmed to dump 250 milligrams of sodium each day. So you are pre-programmed, your kidneys, to dump 250 milligrams of sodium each day. Now, what did I tell you about how salt and water swells up the cell today because of people's diets, and it's destroying the internal metabolism of the cell? When you eat meat, when you eat dairy, when you eat all these things that are acidic, you set up an emergency state in the body. Why? Because if the pH falls below, 7.0, 7.2, I don't know what it is, somewhere in there, you die. All your enzymes stop functioning, right? Mm-hmm. If the pH drops below a certain amount. So what happens? The body goes into emergency mode. What does it do? It has 2 mechanisms. There's something called the calcium buffering system. So it'll start dumping calcium into the bloodstream to try to start to neutralize some of that acidity. But the other thing that it does, the kidneys now, they start to take up that slack. They now have to dump the acidity. They have to start dumping the acidity in exchange for the sodium they would normally get rid of. So when you eat a high-fat, high-protein diet, you cannot heal because you generate emergency acidity that now the kidneys are responsible for getting rid of. And they do that in exchange for sodium. And so what's happening? Metabolism's getting shut down. So not only is metabolism getting shut down on a high-fat, high-protein diet, because what you're doing at the level of the cell membrane with the saturated fats, right? Mm-hmm. It's now also destroying metabolism on the inside of the cell. Yikes. This is the crux of the matter. You can't heal on a high-protein diet. It is impossible. And 1 second, I challenge all my companions to do this because I can't tell my patients to do it. My patients are there to heal from cancer. So I can't tell them to do this. They come to the clinic, their meals are included. So you watch the companions walk out 10 to 15 pounds lighter after a 2 to 3 week stay. So I tell them, okay, guys, go home, continue this for another month. So most of that sodium is out of the cells. Then go out and eat a steak. Go out and eat a steak. You know what happens? The next day, they can't get the ring off their finger. They can't get the ring off their finger because now the kidneys are trying to get rid of the acidity because of the steak, and it's reuptaking sodium into the body, swelling up the body.
One thing that I would like to add when you talked about the calcium buffering, that mechanism that the body does to protect itself, right? It's a protection so that we don't die. But what that does, especially as we see in women as they age, This is the starting of, along with the lack of resistance exercise, some of those things, osteoporosis, osteopenia. Now you know why these things are occurring and happening to you. It starts right here. We've always talked, digestion, utilization, these types of things. Well, we don't want to be utilizing things that are causing these issues, right? So it's all about the proper nutrients, the proper digestion, proper alkalinity, getting to that point to when, hey, you're in your 60s, you're not dealing with something like osteoporosis, osteopenia, these things that are debilitating to most people who have them, and it leads them into the next 20, 30 years of their life, if they're lucky to live that long,
yeah,
of so many major issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. That's what we're seeing today. I'm a chiropractor. I can x-ray anyone today from 50 to 60 years old, and they're all showing signs of osteoporosis at this point. And that's why. That's why.
Let me ask
simple
you
reason.
too, is there anything in addition to everything that the Gerson therapy offers to help cleanse the pathways of the kidneys and the lymphatic system? I've read so much that, well, before you really do your detox, you need to make sure that you cleanse these pathways first so that you can fully, expel everything properly. Is there anything specific to those systems that need to be done in advance?
Well, what it is on the Gerson therapy, right? It's the coffee enema. And we didn't go into that, right? We just addressed metabolism. We didn't address the detoxification portion of the Gerson therapy, which is the coffee enema. And there is nothing more potent than the coffee enema to detoxify the liver, the kidneys, the lymphatics. That is how you start to detox all of these systems. It's through detoxification of the liver, right? But look, the juicing, that's detoxifying the kidneys. I mean, we also have Hippocrates soup. A part of Gerson's therapy is something called Hippocrates soup, created by Hippocrates 2,500 years ago, which he gave to his patients to cleanse their kidneys and their liver. So the patients are getting Hippocrates soup every single day, and it's tomatoes, potatoes, onion, garlic, leek, and celery root, and so, or parsley root. Either of those.
There's a lot of natural salt that occurs in
celery.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But not the root.
Celery, not the root. Right?
Okay.
And so today, what are people told to do? Juice celery.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. So look, Gerson took celery itself out of the therapy. The only time he would substitute celery is if he couldn't get celery root. That was the only time. And that was never back when he was alive, right? So it was parsley root or celery root that went into the Hippocrates soup. But today, celery, you Google green juice or what to juice when you're sick, and this is what you always get. You get celery, or you get a combination of spinach, cucumber, kale. Mm-hmm. All four Gerson eliminated from his juicing protocol.
Now, healthy person, how much of those things would you suggest?
Never juice spinach. You'll end up with kidney stones. I see it all the time.
It's just for It's just for eating raw consumption.
Yeah, raw. You got to eat a lot of raw spinach to get the concentration you would get out of a bunch of juicing, right? But you shouldn't juice spinach, at least for long periods of time. But kale, I don't know.
Is it the oxalates?
That's right. Okay. The oxalic acid. That's right. It's so highly concentrated in oxalic acids that it causes kidney stones. And I've seen it. I've seen people who just were juicing spinach essentially and exclusively, and they walked into a lecture one time, deviled over. I thought they herniated their disc from picking something up, and it was the contrary. She said to me, she says, well, I don't know. I've been on this vegetarian diet for 3 months. I'm like, ma'am, if you're on a proper vegetarian diet for 3 months, you'd be looking pretty good right now. And sure enough, I said to her, you got to stop juicing spinach. She didn't even tell me. And she's like, how did you know? I'm like, ma'am, you have oxalic acid kidney stones from juicing too much spinach. So anyway, long story short.
Yeah, really quick question on that. A lot of doctors we know, they'll say the sickest people that we typically see are, your plant-based eaters.
Most of them will say vegans.
Vegans
are vegans.
Right. So if you want to address that, right, what is what is healthy? What will they not achieve when they're doing this? And what are they doing which is causing them to be unhealthy?
Well, boy, I guess I'd have to take issue with that, right? The healthiest people I've ever met are fruitarians. The healthiest people I've ever met are fruitarians. How they can eat fruit their whole life, I have no idea. I can't do it. But they seem to be the healthiest people I've ever met. The reality is this, and it may be hard to believe. Everything you need is essentially in every single food. And so if vegans are unhealthy, it's because they're probably eating stuff they shouldn't be eating, right? Take soy, for example. If you don't eat soy after properly breaking it down so that all the toxic byproducts that are in it aren't released, you're going to get sick. And so some of the sickest people I've ever met were vegans or vegetarians whose primary protein source was soy. They destroyed their gut with soy, okay? So I'd have a hard time believing that, that statement that, well, the unhealthiest people I've ever met are vegans. Not me. The unhealthiest people I've ever met are people who eat meat and potatoes 3 times a day. Those are the unhealthiest people I've ever met. If a vegan's unhealthy, it's because they're doing things like soy. Maybe they're eating a lot of nuts and seeds that aren't being properly prepared, before that, but boy. And I know a lot of vegetarians that, and vegans that are morbidly obese because they're eating potato chips and vegan cookies and,
all the substitutes, all the easy, convenient things in the store.
Right.
Hey, we pick it up from time to time too,
right,
because it's easy.
Vegan cheese. I mean, come on, vegan cheese. Really? That is just garbage. Nobody should be eating that garbage. It's not food, so anyway.
Well, I think
that's probably what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what? It comes down to the simple principle, right? Which is a lot of things that, we have been teaching for years, which it comes down to the digestion and the utilization. And that is what's obviously missing in most everybody's diets, right? When we consume something, because I think you've said it many times, you're an advocate for this diet, but you will have meat every once in a while.
That's
You'll
right.
do this. And so it comes down to, well, we need to take these extra steps when we eat things that are very difficult on our bodies to digest. Supplemental enzymes, probiotics, these things that become vastly important to as a supplement to today's modern world of living, because we're everything is contaminated to some degree and some level. And then when we start to, from what we see every day, working in enzymes and probiotics, our clients deal with things like acid reflux and GERD's disease. All of these things start with enzyme deficiencies, become probiotic deficiencies, end up becoming hydrochloric acid deficiencies because they rob the whole entire system, and their whole system shot to where they can't even digest raw food.
Yeah.
To where something only that they can digest is straight juice. And that it ends up coming to be, you need to go to the Gerson therapy to get healed, when they could have started all these other paths, but they didn't give up their cooked meat. They didn't give up, these things, which cooked meat is one of the very most difficult things to digest. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that during the conference coming up. So if this airs first or the other one airs first, and I'm not going to say pick a side or, because that's a battle, but it's the amount, right? It comes down to how much are we doing things that are so acidic to our bodies, and then we wonder why we may have issues. I have some dental issues, and it came back to things that I was doing, embarrassing wise, and I have to get these things fixed. It wasn't something that I was doing on my regular health routine. It was something that I was doing and falling asleep and not brushing my teeth while I had this. So there are certain things that we have to take into account. And one thing that we've always taught is you have to take healthcare into your own hands,
That's
because if you don't do it, you're going to find yourself either going down the route to go see Dr. Vickers, or you're going to go down the rabbit hole to go to the doctors in the hospital that just
be poisoned.
Be poisoned and end up in a cycle to where your families are going to be,
you won't get out of it.
Yeah, destructed for many years to come.
That's right. And that pretty much sums it up, That
Well,
pretty much sums it up.
The key takeaways when we're focused on metabolism for the everyday person, somebody who is trying to prevent disease down the road or just trying to lose some weight, the big 3 things that I take away, and you tell me if you want to add any more, is first heal the gut, and do that by whether you consume aloe, taking additional probiotics and enzymes, really looking at your diet and seeing how can I incorporate more juices, more things that are found in nature. Eat as close to the vine as you possibly can to help to heal. Yeah. And eliminate fats, incorporate flax oil on an everyday basis, but eliminate cooking with fats.
That's right.
And then lastly,
that's a big question, right? If we don't cook with fats, well, then how can we cook on things like cast iron, right? Because we went away from, nonstick cookware to where we can cook without oil. Mm-hmm. Now we're on cast iron where everything sticks. So how do we, what is the...
It's not easy. Right? I mean, what I've done, you do a lot of baking. So that's an easy way to eliminate the fats.
Well, how do you guys do it in your clinic in regards
to... A little bit of water.
Protein, water. Yeah.
I mean, really
I've spritzed a few things of avocado oil.
Oh, well, a spritz not going to kill you, right?
Isn't that the magical thing? It's not going to kill you.
I didn't endorse that. Yeah. I just said you could do worse, right?
But for the everyday person, instead of taking the olive oil and wringing it around the pan multiple times, just doing a small spritz.
That's right. I don't see a problem with that. I don't see a problem with that other than for my patients, right?
Right. And then offsetting that by consuming flax oil on a daily basis. Right. Children as well, right? You endorse the same 1 tablespoon for kids too?
Oh, a child might need a teaspoon a day.
A teaspoon. Okay. And then trying to eliminate as much salt as you possibly can.
No doubt about it.
Really hard to eliminate entirely.
You put the flax oil in the macaroni and cheese for the children.
Right, exactly.
Gross.
The highly sodium,
right?
dehydrated.
Their health starts. Their health starts young. So, we care so much about our children, but every food that's geared towards our children are things that will ultimately kill them.
It will. Right. And I tell you, it's tough. Our son was so good at eating everything we would give him, and here comes our daughter, and she is the pickiest of pickiest.
Oh no!
It's really hard. It's really hard. So I'm probably eating my words now with things that she's eating when I know she shouldn't, but it's like she's got to eat something.
And somehow we continue to buy things like healthier ice cream that
organic. Hey, it's organic.
It's organic. It's this. It's that.
Okay. You're speaking to the choir on a lot of things too. So we are by no means perfect. We are just striving to do the best we can.
I'm guilty.
Yeah.
I'm guilty.
Any last words on what somebody can do so they don't have to see you?
Yeah, look, it's simple. I mean, again, just concentrating on healing the gut, right? I'd be, like you said, on a nice supplement protocol of probiotics, enzymes. One probiotic we didn't mention, and I don't know if Shan produces a probiotic with Saccharomyces boulardii in it. The overabuse of antibiotics destroys the natural flora of Saccharomyces boulardii in our intestinal tract. So that'd be great if Shan could produce a supplement like that, because that's one that's often overlooked by all your naturopathic doctors as well, and that's the one most destroyed by antibiotics. So. So taking a good supplement protocol to supplement, that's why they're called supplements. They're supposed to be supplemented with proper diet. And, again, The body's obligatory loss of sodium on a daily basis is like 230 milligrams, 250 milligrams, something like that. That's less than a quarter of a teaspoon, I think. You know, and now you had mentioned in the beginning, there's people out there saying you should drink some salt water, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, if healthy people were to take a quarter of a teaspoon or less of a Celtic salt or a Himalayan salt and dissolve it in a quart of water and sip that throughout the day, that actually would probably support health, in that the body's obligatory loss of salt on a daily basis is 230 to 250 milligrams, which means that's what your diet must take in. And so I don't see a problem with that in a healthy person, you know? But the problem is,
even if they're
people
consuming more salt throughout the day in foods,
or they're putting in 2 teaspoons or 2 tablespoons of salt and sucking that down, you know, and nothing could be more destructive, you know. But when you realize scientifically, the body's obligatory loss of sodium is 250 milligrams, which is what you need on a daily basis to maintain optimal health in the realm of sodium consumption, right? So, you know, but anyway, beyond that, you're going to run into problems. So it's got to be low sodium.
You know, I know so you're an advocate for little to no meat in the diet. So if somebody says, I am not willing to give up meat in my diet, what number per week would you feel comfortable that they don't come see you, you know, that was consuming meat?
Yeah. So, you know, I eat meat 20 to 25 times a year. So what is that? Once every couple of weeks, or, you know, a little bit less than that, maybe, you know, once, and that's only one meal. You know, I might eat a burger, and it's not because I think it's healthy. It's not healthy, clearly, you know, but it's because I'm that guy. I ain't giving up my meat, you know, so I don't think I could, you know. I mean, on occasion, I like a piece of bacon. You know, on occasion, I like a burger. On occasion, you know, I love an elk burger or a buffalo burger or something, you know. And there's probably, you know, biblical ramifications of that too, you know, but I don't know yet. But, you know, we could go into that. Anyway.
So you meant beef bacon, of course.
Yeah, of course. No. So, but anyway.
We'll have to come back for another series, even though you already know all this.
You know, but look, if you're eating, and that was Gerson, 80%, 20%. That he said that even that 20% is going to keep you functioning at a more optimal level. Your body functioning at a more optimal level because it has work to do, you know. So he was really fond of the 80-20 rule, you know, if you were healthy or even when you were cured of your cancer, you know. So, yeah, look, you just need to use common sense based on the principles that Gerson laid out regarding metabolism and that I laid out here in the lecture. You just can't consume a lot of saturated fat, if really any, you know. Secondly, you just can't consume a lot of salt. And you got to get a boatload of fruits and vegetables in your diet on a daily basis. I'll literally eat 4 or 5 Granny Smith apples in a day. And I'll eat a clamshell of raspberries and blueberries in a day. I eat a lot of organic produce in a day. And if I didn't do these things, I'd probably be dead because the stress levels are so high, you know, in today's world and in my work that I don't, you know, I don't think I'd be alive if I didn't do these things, you know. So very basic, simple tenets that I laid out today are biochemistry 101. I learned it all in Biochem 101. They didn't teach us that it was to heal and cure advanced diseases because they didn't know. They only knew that that was the essential foundations of life that they were teaching us in Biochemistry 101. And Gerson showed us that's how you cure disease. And this is how you properly restore those aspects of metabolism that we've destroyed from day one.
It's perfect. And I love it how all of it truly goes back to Genesis. You know, you look at how God created us, our physique, our, you know, pH levels, and you look at the Gerson therapy taking you closer to that Genesis 129 diet and how it heals. So to me, it's so simple that is so overlooked by everybody today. But when you truly follow what was written way back when you see how it's relevant for everybody.
Well, look, in relating to the Bible again, whenever they talk about the king's food, right? What's it always associated with?
Yeah.
Disease.
Yep.
Right. And what was the king's food? All the garbage I mentioned, all the meat and cheese and,
all the
wine.
saturated. Yes.
Yeah.
Fully saturated.
Most likely that bacon that you mentioned.
More than likely.
Yeah. And that's why God said, don't eat it. Right.
Right. It's not like he was trying to just make our life a hassle.
Yeah.
He lays out rules for our protection, whether we choose to break those. Like I don't understand anyone who can eat shrimp and seafood and lobster. I don't get it. Why would you eat something that's cleaning up the crap of our oceans and our lakes and stuff? I just, it's just common sense.
It is.
It's a good God.
He is. And
100%.
so in closing, why don't you go ahead and share who is a good candidate to reach out to you, for somebody that is maybe in this situation where they have cancer or they have a family member, and where can they find more details about you and how to reach out to you?
Follow your work.
Yeah, thank you. So look, the 8 movies that have been done on our work have been done on cancer, because that's where the Gerson therapy has had its most dramatic effects, right? But the reality is we're reversing virtually every single degenerative disease. We talked about diabetes, high blood pressure. 2 weeks, you're off more than likely off all your high blood pressure medications. If you're scheduled for a triple, quadruple bypass surgery in a month, we're canceling your surgery. We're reversing virtually every single degenerative disease, not just cancer. So anyone who's suffering in that realm, we can help. Weight loss, obesity, depression, all of these things are metabolism, gut-mind connection, right? Obesity, clearly metabolic issues, right? So we're healing virtually everything. It's not just cancer. So how do people get in contact with us? Well, our website's gersonclinic.com. Gerson is Gerson, gersonclinic.com. You can always reach me at director@gersonclinic.com. And yeah, that's where you can get in contact with me. If you go to gersonclinic.com or gersonclinics.com, that's actually our store. And you'll see all the Gerson therapy products, like the potassium that flushes sodium out of the body. We've got Shan supplements up there to help restore the probiotics, the natural flora of the gut. So that's up there as well. And all the other supplements that we have on the Gerson therapy that are designed to work in conjunction and enhance Dr. Gerson's work. That's all up in our store as well. So, that's how people can get a hold of us and take their health into their own hands and get it out of the pharmaceutical and medical industry's hands, because God knows they're already making enough money.
Are you planning any upcoming retreats? I know you had a bunch of retreats prior to, the world falling apart.
Yeah, and I haven't really had any since the world fell apart, because people are financially it's becoming less feasible, and logistically traveling is becoming horrific. And so I really haven't had any. However, we just moved to Florida, and we have purchased a home in a gated country club community here outside of Fort Myers, which we just went through the eye of the hurricane, and another one's coming this week. Did you hear that?
No.
There's another hurricane coming this week. Not so bad as Ian, but so we're in Fort Myers, and we've purchased a townhouse in a place called Babcock Ranch, where we're actually staying right now as we transition into our home at River Hall. We're in a condo at Babcock Ranch. You should Google Babcock Ranch. It is America's first solar town. It's its first solar city. And when Ian hit, the only place that did not lose electricity and internet was Babcock Ranch. Yep. So everywhere around us was out of electric for a week, and we didn't lose it for a minute here at Babcock Ranch. 100,000 solar panels in a nature preserve, which is surrounds the entire community. So it's a huge nature preserve, and this solar powered community is inside the nature reserve. And so we're going to have a townhouse in that house, and we're going to start doing retreats once the townhouse is finished, which will be the end of February, right in time for spring break. And so hopefully we'll be promoting that for either March or early April. And we'll see, we'll see the demand that comes out of that. Hopefully they haven't continued to crash the economy by then, which my goal, my belief is that by the year 2025, we're all going to be broke. But, I think that's where it's headed.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Yes. Thank you for taking your time. We know it's so valuable. You help so many people. So we truly are honored to have you join us and share your wealth of information. And everybody, go follow the Advanced Gerson Therapy Clinic on Facebook. You also have a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So make sure you follow along. They post a lot of testimonials of patients who are being cured, and it's a phenomenal place run by a phenomenal person. So thank you so much for joining us. We truly appreciate it.
And thanks to everybody in the chat room as well. So thank you guys so much as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chris and Liz. I'll see you hopefully soon. And thanks for all you're doing for me with Shan's products right now, drop shipping them for me. But
awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, everyone, take care.
We'll talk to you soon.